So this afternoon I'm going to paint a background for these two bluetits I've drawn. The background's going to be a muted sort of chocolatey colour, grey, neutral grey if you like, background, so that it doesn't compete with the beautiful colours of the two bluetits that are perched on a willow tree. The willow tree, or the branches of the willow tree, I'm not going to fuss about with at the moment. I've just drawn a suggestion of them in, but that will come later on. The key thing is to work quickly into a prepared wet background. I've wet this background with clear water using a number 8 natural hairbrush, and the reason I use a natural hairbrush is because for the background is because it holds a lot of water so that I can quickly cover the whole background, and I only have a short amount of time to get the background in before it starts becoming dry. So what I do is I first paint a little bit away from the blue tit. You can see that the background, the paper is very wet at the moment. The water's not really moving on the background because it's so wet. And what I'll do with a smaller brush now is I'll start pushing that paint into the right direction close to the blue tit. So the background is still wet, and I'm moving the paint around with a smaller brush with a bit more precision, if you like, around the outline of the blue tit. And whilst I do this, of course, the background is drying all the time, so I'm not going to be able to paint the background all in one go, but I wet the whole of the background so that I don't get any hard edges, because I don't want hard edges to distract the viewer from the main feature of the painting, which of course is the blue tits. So I'm just using a number 2 round brush to push this paint around. It's a mixture, the colour of the background is a mixture of cobalt blue and light red. So you can see that the blue and the light red are separating a little bit. And I have to work quickly to make sure, as I mentioned earlier, that I don't get any hard edges in the background. Hard edges in the right places can be very effective. In the wrong places, they can distract the viewer from what you're trying to convey, and also look a bit ugly if they are in the wrong areas of your painting. If you do get a hard edge appearing that you don't want, just dampen it, the edge of it, with a soft brush, and that will ensure that the hard edge is lost. The background, of course, doesn't have to be perfectly sort of uniform in colour. All sorts of things could be going on in the background in real life. And I'm just going to, I notice all the time I'm looking at the paper to make sure that it's not going matte, because when it goes matte, that indicates that the paper's drying. So I'm just going to, with a little bit of water, not too much, a little bit of water on my number 2 brush, just wet the areas that are beginning to go a little bit matte, losing their shine around the top blue tit in my painting. And remember, when you're painting wet onto wet, like I'm doing here with this background, the strength of tone of your paint will reduce by 30 to 40% as compared to what you have on your palette. So if it looks a bit dark and a little bit ominous on your palette, remember that's going to lighten when you apply it to the wet paper. And again, dropping the paint into my background and then moving the paint around with a smaller brush with a bit more precision around the edge of the blue tit. There's a lot more work that will go into the background. This is, if you like, the base layer. So don't fuss too much about the colour or the shape of parts of the background, as long as I think you have quite a muted background if you're doing a background for birds. So all the time I'm pushing paint around, trying to make the background just look very natural and unobtrusive. It's quite an ugly colour really, but it's a very natural colour against a woodland and doesn't compete with the actual subject of the painting, the birds. You can lift a bit of the colour from one part of the background as well while it's still wet and drop it into another wet part of the background, almost using your paper like a palette, if you like. If you make a real significant error in your background at this stage, whilst it's wet on wet, you can always lift it off with some paper towel and then let your background dry again before you do any more work on the background. This is a study really of the blue tits. It's not requiring a whole page, the whole of your paper to be painted. So I'll probably stop at about there and see how it looks. Now I'm going to just drop in a little bit of blue, a bit of variation to the colour in my background. Again, to make the background look quite natural. And I can do that whilst the paper is still wet, knowing that I'll still have a soft edge to the background. The blue tits are beginning to get lost against the background because they're only drawn in pencil, but once I start painting the blue tits, they'll reappear in all their glory, really. Again, I've just washed my brush and I've taken a little bit of the water off and dampened it just to lift a little bit of colour off my paper to vary my background a bit. And you'll see there are no hard edges, it's all soft edged, the background, so nothing to distract the viewer from the beauty of the blue tits once I get on to painting their yellow breasts and the blue cap of the blue tits. They'll really stand out against this background. Okay, what I'm just doing is I'm just spreading some of the paint about a bit to give a bit of variation in tone to the scene, and there I'll leave it, the background, to dry now.